Thank you, everybody, for joining me today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Trudy, and I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager at O'Connell's OBM and The Goods, our collaborative network of businesses. Before I get into the session, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we live, learn, and play. Today, I'm coming to you from the Goods office in Meanjin, Brisbane, on Yuggera and Turrbal land, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. So, just quickly, for those of you who are new to the Goods, a little bit of background. The Goods is a collaborative network of service providers helping business owners to build a good business and live a great life. I'm really not joking when I say that the Goods has all of the connections that your business needs, from helping you engage your team, market your brand, set your systems up for success, support your sustainability journey, achieve financial freedom, and keep you on track towards the good bits, and so much more. You can see that there's a good connection for every step of your business journey. So if there is something keeping you awake at night, reach out and we can make a good introduction to the right connection in our network. My computer's just having a little moment here. It's decided to work now. All right, I am really excited and proud, really, to be talking to everyone today about what's happening in Australia and abroad in terms of some of the key sustainability developments that have been happening recently and how it might impact your business, as well as sharing about how you can start to embed sustainability into your business by leveraging your existing financial data. Specifically today, I want to share about what's happening in Australia in terms of the sustainability reporting requirements specifically, and take a look at demystifying carbon accounting. So today, I could talk about this for hours, in my opinion, but we do have only 30 minutes. And so what I want to do today is take a look at the current landscape, how we can account for carbon, and what are carbon emissions. I want to take a look at what the current reporting requirements are for businesses in Australia, and then also touch on what else you should be thinking about. I want to start by saying sustainability isn't just a trend. It's a core business strategy, and that's become a worldwide thing now. As climate change accelerates, businesses are under growing pressure from governments, investors, and consumers to reduce their environmental impact. You might have already noticed that today's consumers, even think about your own purchasing choices, everyone is more environmentally conscious, and consumers' purchasing decisions are increasingly being influenced by companies' sustainability practices. And I think this is true regardless of whether you are a product-based or service-based business. For us at O'Connell's OBM and the Goods more broadly, we believe that sustainability is a fundamental element of modern business. We've already implemented a number of changes to our business with a focus on how we can be more sustainable, changing waste processes, reviewing our suppliers, and about 18 months ago, we and all of the businesses within the Goods committed to achieving net zero by 2030. Now, for us, this commitment isn't just a vision. It really is a roadmap of actionable steps that we've started to share with our clients and our broader community. And we'll be sharing more about those with you as we go along this journey. Of course, a critical part of this journey is understanding our impact, and that starts with measurement. And that's why this is something that I'm really proud of, and I know the rest of the team are as well. We're really proud to formally introduce our carbon accounting offering recently. It's designed to empower businesses to track their carbon emissions, identify reduction opportunities, and make informed, impactful decisions, just as we've been doing these past near 18 months since we made that commitment to net zero. Excuse me. Because as the saying goes, what gets measured gets managed. By measuring emissions, businesses can confidently set realistic targets and implement sustainable practices that align with future growth and environmental stewardship, an ever-increasing focus area for consumers, employees, banks, and stakeholders alike. Additionally, climate-related financial reporting is already mandatory for many large organisations, and this requirement is compelling them to seek carbon data from their supply chain. And we'll take a closer look at that shortly. So this is where carbon accounting comes in. Put simply, carbon accounting is the measurement of an organization's greenhouse gas emissions from its activities. Electricity use, buying goods and services, waste, traveling, and investing all contribute to your business's carbon number. So, carbon accounting itself involves identifying and quantifying all of the sources of emissions within an organization's operations. So, that's direct emissions from those activities that involve burning fossil fuels. So, like I said, driving a car, and those indirect emissions. So, that might be the consumption of electricity, the freight of materials, and like I mentioned, the purchase of goods and services, all of those indirect activities in your business. Accounting for this, accounting for that, counting up. What's the point of just measuring your carbon? Is that really going to solve the climate crisis? We hear this mentioned from time to time, and it's a valid point. Accounting for your carbon alone is not going to solve the climate crisis, but it is a key to unlocking climate action. Businesses that account for carbon and account for their climate impact will find that it provides them with much more than just a number. It allows you to understand your impact, build internal knowledge, and give you the insights you need to drive informed decision making focused on making an impact. Okay, that all sounds great, but what are we actually measuring here? So I mentioned before that carbon accounting is the measurement of your business's greenhouse gas emissions, and that is the greenhouse gases that are emitted by your business from its activities and operations. So what are greenhouse gases, or GHGs, as you might see them referred to? So these are gases present in our atmosphere that absorb and emit energy within the thermal infrared wavelength of light. So these wavelengths are slightly longer than the visible spectrum that we see in day to day. Stay with me here. These gases essentially trap some of the incoming solar radiation, warming our planet. Basically, greenhouse gases are responsible for raising temperatures that are leading to climate change and its catastrophic consequences. The primary greenhouse gases that drive the greenhouse effect are water vapor, so that's H2O, and that's in the form of clouds. Carbon dioxide is CO2, methane, CH4, nitrous oxide, N2O, and ozone, O3. So when it comes to carbon accounting, you're calculating the quantity of those gases generated from your business's activities, and the output is usually expressed as a kilo of CO2. Under the GHG protocol, emissions are split up into scopes. You might have heard of these. They're different categories of emissions. So there are three scopes used in GHG accounting, and these differentiate between direct and indirect emissions. I've got a little bit of a diagram on screen that gives you some idea about these, but let's take a look at Scope 1 emissions first. So Scope 1 emissions, these are the direct greenhouse gas emissions from sources that are owned or controlled by your business, such as burning fuels from cars, trucks, gas stoves, boilers, and barbecues. Then we have Scope 2 emissions, electricity and indirect GHG emissions from purchased electricity consumed by your business, like what's on your power bill, fall into this scope. Scope 2 emissions are generally straightforward. It's the emissions associated with the electricity, steam, heat, or cooling a business that a business buys from a utility or retailer. So these Scope 2 emissions represent one of the largest sources of GHG emissions globally. That's a mouthful. With generation of electricity and heat now accounting for at least a third of all global GHG emissions. And that's, a big part of the push towards renewable energy. These emissions are categorized as indirect, and they're technically emitted from sources owned by other entities, so not your business directly. That might be the electricity provider rather than your business generating the electricity yourselves. And then we have Scope 3 emissions. These are other indirect emissions which are a consequence of the activities of your business, but occur from sources not owned or controlled by your business. So like all the suppliers that your business buys goods and services from. From its brief description just now, this category probably makes the least sense, and it is quite complex. Scope 3 emissions, though, are essentially every other emission in the value chain other than Scope 1 and 2, meaning most of a company's emissions are related to Scope 3 sources. In fact, it's often around 80 to 90% of your business's emissions will fall into Scope 3. So it really is absolutely critical to account for these Scope 3 emissions. Scope 3 emissions are divided into 15 categories. I won't run through all 15 today, but just to give you an idea of some of them. So those categories are purchased goods and services, fuel and energy related activities, upstream transportation and distribution, waste, business travel, um, downstream transportation, end of life treatment of sold products. So, for example, if you were selling a washing machine, what's going to happen to that washing machine after you've sold it? Franchises and investments, and the list really goes on. Just want to take a look at a brief example just to help explain this a little bit further. So, let's say, for example, that we're a very small scale company, we sell one cake per day. Scope 3 emissions would therefore come from the purchasing of ingredients for the cake, the freight associated with taking the cake from our kitchen to the shop front, the disposal of any waste generated from the cake, so that might be eggshells, and the equipment required to create the cake, so the oven, the electric mixers, and the like. Now, this is where it does get a little bit tricky. So you might be thinking, what if this business gets its eggs from a large company and they have no idea how many emissions are involved with their chicken farm? How are we supposed to account for that? And this is a big problem because most of the time they don't know and we don't know. So step one is asking the supplier if they have the data. Ask them, hey, what's your emissions data here? If they don't have that information, we can use generic industry averages to get the CO2 equivalent, the carbon equivalent of buying these eggs. So at O'Connell's OBM, we tap into a large database of emissions factor averages through some of the software that we use, and I'll explain a little bit more of that shortly. But we basically have access to the use of some standards and averages. So if you've tried everything else reasonable and we can't get specific data, then we do have averages that have been signed off against that we can use in your carbon accounting. Of course, this isn't practical for the rest of eternity. We do need to actually measure how suppliers are reducing emissions. So that we can reduce yours as well. And that's why you may need to start thinking about this process and carbon accounting sooner than you think. So this leads us to understanding what the current reporting requirements are. Because just as you might need to understand your Scope 3 emissions from those in your supply chain, if your business is in another company's supply chain, they're going to be asking you for this data too. So in Australia, new sustainability reporting requirements were legislated in September of this year, so September 24. Starting in 1 January 2025, so just 2 short weeks away or 3 weeks away, this legislation is going to require large entities to include detailed climate-related disclosures on their annual reports, covering aspects such as climate strategy, governance, risk management, and their Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. So these obligations will start and be phased in over 3 different groups from the 1st of January in 2025 through to 1 July 27. And it's going to start with those organisations with a revenue of $500 million or more. And those will be first. And then across the next 3 years, businesses up to with $50 million or more revenue will be required to comply from 2027. You might be sitting here thinking, well, but my business is nowhere near 50 million in revenue. Even if your business doesn't meet the $50 million revenue threshold, you could still be asked to provide carbon emissions data if you're involved in a supply chain with large companies that are required to report. Perhaps you supply your food to Woolworths or it's you're stocking meat at Coles. You may be asked for this data sooner rather than later. This is also becoming more common, particularly in Queensland with the Olympics upon us in 6 years, 7 years as it is now. And the state government has been assessing tenders based on climate impact. So if you supply, like I mentioned, any types of good to large organizations, Woolworths and the like, you may be asked for your emissions data as contributing Scope 3 emissions to that business's supply chain. Additionally, regulations may tighten in the future, and it's likely at some point that all businesses of all sizes are going to be required to report their carbon emissions at some point. So thinking about this now and starting to think about it and look at your usage and your own emissions, even though it isn't a legal requirement today, allows your business to stay ahead of these changes and be ready when the time comes. By tracking and managing emissions now, your business can identify areas for cost savings as well, such as reducing energy use, cutting waste, or improving your supply chain's efficiency. You can also enhance your brand's reputation by positioning yourself as a leader in sustainability, something that's become increasingly important to customers, investors, and even employees and team members. So there are a lot of benefits to starting to think about this now. You'll know where you stand and be ready when, not if, you're asked for your emissions data. You'll be able to prioritize the actions you need to take to reduce your emissions as the world moves towards net zero. You'll appeal to your customers, like I mentioned, and talent who expect companies to understand their impact. You'll be positioned to meet those compliance requirements as they continue to evolve. You'll satisfy requests for this data from your key stakeholders, including potential financiers. And you'll be able to tell your sustainability story with data to back it up. That's going to reduce greenwashing risks. This isn't just a local issue either. Sustainability really is a global priority. International regulations are tightening as well, not just in Australia, and many global supply chains are already requiring carbon data from their suppliers, even if those suppliers are small and medium-sized businesses. So taking action now will help you stay ahead of the curve as these pressures only increase and ensure that your business is ready for what's to come. You might be sitting here, and I understand it can sound a bit complex and overwhelming, particularly for smaller businesses. You know, maybe you're thinking, oh, this is another thing I have to do. But that's where we come in at O'Connell's OBN. So we've partnered with Someday, our preferred technology provider for carbon accounting. We're Someday certified advisors, and Someday enables us to make carbon accounting an extension of your existing financial accounting and reporting. So we can leverage the data that's already in your existing Xero file to help you start to account for carbon and look at your emissions. So to help you measure your impact and leverage your existing financial data, we've created a 4-step carbon accounting service. We make it easy for you to understand your impact, build that internal knowledge, and give you the insights that you need to make an informed decision focused on making an impact. So here's the 4 stages of accounting for carbon. The first step starts with a carbon readiness assessment. This is designed to give us an accurate picture of your business and any specific industry reporting requirements. Then it will identify the key data required and potential gaps with suggestions on how to proceed. We'll provide you with a recommended action plan, considerations, and future further ideas to support your sustainability journey. For organizations quantifying their emissions for the first time, we'll then be performing a baseline emissions assessment. So this involves identifying and quantifying all of the sources of emissions within an organization's operations, including your direct emissions from activities like burning fossil fuels, driving a car, as well as indirect emissions associated with the consumption of electricity, freight of materials, or from the purchase of those goods and services that you buy, so from suppliers within your value chain. We'll connect your accounting file to our carbon accounting platform Someday and start by analysing your existing data. We'll start with Scope 1 and 2 emissions assessment based on quantifying those emissions, and we'll also help you contact suppliers to access further data to improve the quality of a more comprehensive Scope 3 assessment. At this stage, we'll also meet with you to review the findings, look at the data quality, and we'll go over some initial improvement opportunities. Typically, once we have that baseline, we get to step 3, We'll then monitor, code, and review your transactions, typically over a 3-month period. So once your carbon accounting system is set up, we'll start over those 3 months testing, embedding, and improving that reporting data. We'll complete the carbon coding for your business for a 3-month period, and we'll also continue to help you reach out to suppliers for that Scope 3 emissions data. Along the way, we'll be able to supply information to educate your team on any gaps that you might need to improve the accuracy of your carbon number. And then finally, step 4, we'll provide you with the ongoing support that you need to keep your impact going. So we'll create a customized carbon coding guide, and we can support your ongoing efforts in a number of ways. Training your team to correctly code and allocate transactions, or we can work alongside your existing bookkeeper or in-house finance team to continue to provide monthly carbon accounting services. And of course, we're also on hand for regular reviews and audits. What if you don't have the data? This is a question that comes up quite a bit. Look, it's not essential to have all of your ducks in a row from a data perspective. Nobody does really. But using our carbon readiness assessment and tapping into our carbon accounting software, we will help you to identify the data required, any gaps, and we'll look at the assumptions that we need to make to help with the establishment of systems and processes that will support improved carbon accounting and some certainty around that moving forward. Some other common FAQs that we hear from time to time and that you might have in the back of your mind. So, do you need to start carbon accounting? From a regulatory perspective, probably not. But from a commercial perspective, the answer is increasingly yes. Is this expensive? Look, we're supporting our clients to make carbon an extension of their existing financial accounting and reporting. We may already have a significant amount of the data required, and we understand your business already. So we're trying to keep these fees accessible to clients of all sizes and industries. If you're interested in this and want to start this process more, we will be able to provide an indication of all of the fees before you start to proceed. Another question that we hear from time to time, do you need to buy carbon credits? Look, no, you don't, unless you're looking at developing a strategy that would enable you to make a carbon neutral claim, then part of this process, you don't need to buy carbon credits. Purchasing carbon credits is entirely separate from the accounting of your carbon emissions in the first place and tracking your progress year on year towards net zero or any other target that you might like to set for your business. Do you have to set a target? Again, no. We can help you determine your current carbon baseline so that you can make an informed decision around setting a target if that's something that's of interest to your business. You might see this, our own business included, that other businesses are starting to set targets, and many companies might be encouraging their suppliers to set net zero targets and report against those. But really what's most important is getting started with credible carbon accounting so that you know where to start and what you've got to work towards. I've noticed there's been quite a few people jumping on the line throughout this session. We will be sending around a recording as we're just about to wrap up, but don't worry, we'll be available for any questions afterwards as well. So what does this all mean? Look, carbon accounting is just the tip of the iceberg. We want to help all stakeholders in your business to deeply understand the numbers so that they can make informed decisions. Carbon accounting can't become another consultant's report in the top drawer, and that's certainly not what we want to achieve here. Carbon reporting becomes most meaningful when it's deeply understood and embedded across the business. And that's why beyond the numbers, we'll also introduce you to the sustainability engagement specialists that you need to improve your impact and engage your team on your broader sustainability journey. Some other questions that you might like to think about now. Do you have a broader sustainability plan and roadmap for your business? And how regularly are you reviewing operations and strategic initiatives from a sustainability lens? How do you communicate sustainability initiatives to your team? These are all questions that you should be considering regardless of your industry. I know we've covered a lot today. I'm right on time, and I know that there's been a lot of new concepts, particularly some of that science around the greenhouse gases. Look, if anything was unclear, or if you've got any specific concerns about your accounting or the new regulations, please feel free to reach out to us. In a nutshell, from today's session, so we took a look at carbon accounting, which is a measure of an organization's greenhouse gas emissions, or GHGs. Those GHGs are gases present in our atmosphere that absorb and emit energy and trap some of the incoming solar radiation, warming our planet. Our businesses, all businesses, produce scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, and scope 3 requires us to examine our supply chains in quite a bit of detail. And where are things sitting currently in Australia in terms of reporting requirements? So in Australia, climate-related financial reporting is now mandatory. For many large organisations, that's going to be in place from 1 January 2025 through to smaller businesses with $50 million plus turnover from 2027. Like I mentioned, though, even if your business is not at that $50 million mark, you may be asked by those larger businesses for your emissions data if you're in their supply chain. So that requirement really is compelling those larger businesses to seek carbon data throughout their supply chain. It means that it really is worth starting to track your emissions now, or at least start thinking about what this looks like for your business. And like I mentioned, with various software platforms now, and particularly Someday, which is our chosen partner platform, it's possible to leverage your existing financial data to do that and start tracking your carbon number. So if you're interested in understanding your carbon number, the starting point involves a carbon readiness assessment, like I mentioned earlier. So we'll review your business and any industry-specific reporting requirements, and then we'll put together a recommended carbon accounting action plan. At the moment, this assessment is completely free of charge. If you are interested in taking a look at that or finding out more about what that means for your business, my contact details will be shared after this. Our carbon accounting specialist, Olivia Fisher, as well, is on hand to answer any questions that you might have. I think the important thing to remember before I wrap this up is I just want to leave you with this, that early action is key here. So by starting to track your emissions now, you'll be in a better position to meet future regulatory requirements and identify those opportunities for cost savings and operational improvements as well, not just sustainability improvements. So I encourage you to take the first step towards a more sustainable business today. Again, thank you everyone for joining me on today's webinar. I do hope that you'll join us as we move forward, measuring what matters most and turning insights into action that lead us all towards a net zero future. Copies of this session and all of the details that you need will be sent around after this, and please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or if you'd like to explore what carbon accounting looks like for your business. Thank you.